Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here. I love Ukraine. This is, I think, my 4th time here, if I'm counting correctly. I've been to Lviv and to Kyiv, and this is my first time in Kyiv, which is awesome. So I love the community here, and I'm enjoying it every time. So I'm really, really thankful to be here. Thank you. This has been a wonderful conference so far, and I'm really excited to be here. Okay, so we're going to talk about forms in Angular, reactive forms, with RxJS, which is also a library for reactive programming, and we're going to see how we're doing this together. So just a little bit more about myself. Yes, I'm a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft. I'm also the founder of NG Girls, and these are images from the NG Girls workshops that we've had in Kyiv in August. So this was a really, really special event that we had. It was a 2-day workshop, and I had a lot of fun. So let's dive right into our subject. Who's working with Angular here? All right, great. So you're in the right place. What do you think about reactive forms? Who's using reactive forms? Okay, good. And what about RxJS? Okay, good, good. So, so it's awesome, but I see that some of you still don't use it, and I really recommend start using it, learning it, and you'll see why in a minute. So let's see the demo. Let's make it a bit larger. Okay, so what we have here, maybe I'll refresh it. We have a cinema room that you can select your seats. And there are different types of seats. They are colored in different colors. So this can be like a seat that's special for children, or some super comfy seat, or something like that. So you need to know the different types. And you configure this whole room in a different form, but I'm not going to show it here. So we already have the configuration of the form, and this is for you, the users. You want to buy tickets to the movie, to the cinema, and you want to select the seats. So you can see that there are already seats that are disabled. And they're already occupied, and this data is coming all the time from the server. It is coming whether with push messages or polling. So we don't really care about the implementation right now. But you can see that that every few seconds you can see that there are seats that are disabled and seats that are released that you can occupy again. You can select them. So I'm going to select a few seats here. You can see that the number here changes. I can select more. And sometimes I might select a seat, but in the server it's already occupied, but I don't know it in the client yet, so it's going to give me an error message and disable it and unselect it. And so I know, and also the count will drop down by 1 again. So so the user will know that they have to select another seat instead of that. Okay. So again, I'm selecting the seats, and we have this live data from the server. And let's see this again. Oops, disabled. Okay. So this is not a real system here. This is what I implemented in purpose of this demo, where I can use the Angular reactive forms with a lot of events that's happening, and I can show a lot of things that we can use RxJS with. So just a little bit about the architecture that I have here, so that you'll understand later what's going on in the code. We have in the client side the room ID. We have it from the router because we route to this specific room. And the router, if you know, uses observables for the parameters. So we send this room ID to the server, and we get the room configuration. We build the form according to the configuration. So the configuration is how many rows we have, how many seats we have in each row, and what are the seat types that we have here. Then we also get the updates about the occupied seats all the time. Not only the ones that are occupied, but also the ones that were released. Then when the user selects a seat, then it validates it against the server. Is the seat occupied right now or not? Because like I said, maybe we didn't get the data in the right time from the server. And of course, you can click save and save your selection and go on to the next step. All right, so why did I choose to do this with a form? So there are several reasons. First of all, there's user input, user interaction here. So this is classic for a form. I'm using validation. The one that I showed you, the async validation about whether the seat is occupied or not. But also we can add synchronous validation. For example, making sure that the user selects the seats with no gap between them, because we want each one to occupy only seats together so that others can also select seats that are one next to the other. In forms, we can disable controls. So here in the form, every seat is a control. And we can disable it so that the user can't interact with it. We can get data from the server and use the form methods to build the form according to this data, and also patch or set values while we're already using the form. And we can submit the form. We have all the values of what the user has selected. The form module gives it to us in a very structured way, very easy to use. So we can easily submit it and use this data in the server. Okay, so we're using reactive forms, and I'm going to show how to do this with RxJS, which is reactive programming. So what is actually reactive programming? I've looked for an accurate answer for that. And a lot of libraries that implement reactive programming, they just tell you how to use it and not what it actually is. So I found this really great source. In the introduction to reactive programming, you've been missing. And it has a really good explanation there. And in one short sentence, reactive programming is programming with asynchronous data streams, meaning that everything that you're doing, everything that you have in the code, you can look at it as a stream as events. And this can be even simple variables. And you react to the stream of events. Whenever you have a new event, you easily just react to it using operators or subscribing to it. Why do I like to use reactive programming and RxJS? There are several reasons, and these are the reasons that motivate me in that. Sorry that I'm blocking some of it. You can have one source of truth, one source of events, and you can have multiple listeners to it. You can subscribe to it from multiple places. And wherever you subscribe to it, it doesn't affect the other subscriptions. So you don't have these side effects there. You can't change the event when you subscribe to it to accidentally change it to someone else or somewhere else in the code that you've subscribed to it. Okay? And then you can also use operators. So RxJS and other reactive programming libraries for other languages. The very big part of it is operators. So you can easily transform the event to whatever you want, whatever you need in this place right now. You can also combine different streams. You can combine the events and combine the values in different ways. So that's very useful when you need more data that is depending on the initial event, or just combine the data together, combine the streams together. Whenever you do that, whether you're combining the events or using operators, you can just you can define this combination, and you're creating a new stream of events. So you can do that in one place, and in another or a few different places, subscribe to this new stream of events. And you don't care how you got this data. You just have the end result, the new events that you need. And you can close the streams. You can either unsubscribe to it, or you can complete the stream, and then you prevent memory leaks. So reactive forms and RxJS might be a bit hard to start using, so my suggestion is just take it one step at a time. I got this video today, so I really needed to show it from my baby back home. Okay. So, so you have a lot of operators, so just start by learning just a few of them, just 10 operators, and then you can start working with it very, very easily. And reactive forms are just straightforward, out of the box, and you just use it. So we're going to see how reactive actually are the reactive forms in Angular. What's reactive about them? Where can we use observables from the forms module? How can we utilize RxJS that in ways that don't come from the forms module, just add it and use it for our forms. So, where do we have, where can we use streams of data and observables in their form? Where do we do this in my use case here? So, first of all, I get the initial data from the server, and I initialize the form. So the data is coming using the HTTP client module, which gives me the data as an observable. And every time I fetch the data, I create a form. And the form itself will also be an observable that we subscribe to it in the component. We get real-time data from the server and subscribe to it to disable or enable the controls, the seats that are occupied or were released at this moment. We use async validators. So for that, we also use observables that call a method on the server. We want to react when there's an error, so we get data from the server, the validation. So not only do we have the error, but we also do some other stuff when we get the error. We have to disable the seat and unselect it. We count our selection. So here we will also use an observable. So let's see how we do this one step after the other. We initialize the form. So first of all, we get data. So like I said, we have the route params, and this is already given to us as a stream, as an observable. And in the activated route that we have. I forgot to mention that we have this DB service that holds all the methods that we need to talk to the server. So just wherever you see the DB, then it means that it's our own service with the methods. Okay, so we have the param map on the router, and we need to get from this param map only the ID of the room. Maybe we have also other parameters. So we use the operator map on the room ID to get the room ID observable. So this is a new observable that we're creating here. Then we can create another observable called room. So we have the room ID, and we switch map it to get another observable that has all the room configuration from the database. So that's get room ID with the ID. Okay, so another observable. So you see that all of these are different observables that in different places we can subscribe to them. And we create them one after the other, one from the other. Okay, now we have the room configuration, and we want to create the form, the room configuration form. So creating the form, we're doing that with a simple function, but I'm taking the output of this function and passing it also as an observable, because I'm mapping the original observable to whatever this method returns, to this form. So I have another observable of forms all the time. And also for another use case, I can also take the room configuration that I got from the server and get the room name out of it. So this is the title that you see above the form. Okay, so again, I'm mapping, I'm getting the configuration, and I know that it has inside the room name. Right. So how do we build the form? The form is, as you can see, we have rows, and we have actually, like the room is made of rows, and each row is an array of the seats. Okay, so the room is an array of rows, and the rows are arrays of seats. And what we get from the server is actually the seat type, which is an ID of the type, and in another way, another call to the server, we get the different types and match it to the ID. This is the seat component, which is a form control. And this is not the full implementation, but these are the important parts for our case. So you can see that the component implements control value accessor. So this is what you need to do when you want to create a control, a form control. And then you have to implement the right value method, which gets called whenever you programmatically change the value of this control. And also, if you want, and we need it in this case, you can implement the set disabled state, and this will be called whenever you disable this control, so the logic inside. And you can see that we use also the disabled variable, the member, in our template of this form. It changes the class, and it also changes the disabled state. And well, you see that we have also other things here, other data that we need, like the seat type, and we get the color from there, and the seat ID. Like I said, it's not the full code here. Okay. So if you've used reactive forms, then you know that it's really easy to set them up, and we do this in the controller or in the code. It can be in a different service even. Now I chose not to use the form builder here, just to make it like more raw, more straightforward to see what we're doing here, but you can also use the form builder, of course. So first we get the configuration, and like we said, we have an array of C types. So we're taking this configuration. First of all, we're creating a form group for the whole form, and we set the member rows, which is the form array. And for the form array, we're getting the rows from our configuration and map them to get each row separately. And for each row, we create another form array, and we map it again to the seats. And I'm saving the control reference to it so I can use it later. So I'm having a constant seat control, and I'm mapping the seats. And for each seat, I'm creating a new form control with the data, the row ID, seat ID, seat type, and whether it's selected by the user. And I also wrote here occupied, but we will not use occupied in the end, because we'll know that if this form control is disabled, then it's actually occupied. But as you can see, we have here data that the user can't really change, but I decided to put this as part of this form control because I wanted to have all the data together so that when I have the value of the seat, then I don't have to look for the seat ID or the seat type in other places. And also when I render this seat, I need to know its seat type, so it already comes naturally to the seat control. And I don't have to combine data from different places. So this was more convenient for me. Maybe you'd like to do it in another way. And also maybe if you're using NGRX, maybe there's a more convenient way for doing this. But I like it that I have all the data here in my control, and I can see it and I can use it in other use cases, as we'll see in the next slides. Okay, so now disabling the seat when we get the data from the server. So there are a few options to do this. I'll show some valid options and also some not valid options. So, here we set the disabled state when we create the form. We get the data. We can maybe get from the server the whole data together, not only the configuration, but with it also what seats are occupied. And then instead of creating the form control of the seat with only the data, we can also pass whether or not it's disabled. So if we go back, here we just passed the object of the value, but if we want to also pass whether it's disabled or not, then we have to split it. So we wrap it in an object with the value object and the disabled Boolean. But in our case, we have real-time updates about the seats. So this is not enough. I need to react on events that I get from the server. So how can I do that? So let's say that the data that I get from the server, whether, again, like I said, whether by push messages or by polling, I'm getting an array of occupied seats and an array of released seats. And the behavior will be almost the same for both of them. So I'm subscribing to this stream of events that I get, the data that I get from the server. And then I iterate on each of the seats that I get on the occupied array. And for each one of them, I need to find the control, the seat control that, that is currently occupied. So I get this data from the server. I get the row ID and the seat ID. So I'm looking at the form, and it has the method get, and I just have to pass the location of the control that I'm looking for. Okay, so we can pass a string, but we can also pass an array that is combined of strings and values that are more like variables that are not hard-coded. So rows is hard-coded, and then we go to the row ID and to the seat ID. Okay, so we have the seat control in our hands, and then we can just disable it. Now, if you disable it without passing anything, then it will emit an event that it was disabled. But in this case, I don't want to emit an event, and because it will interfere with counting the seats that we select. So, and I will show this later in the slides where we get to counting the seats. So I'm passing emit event false. So the same thing exactly for the released seats. So for each seat, I'm getting the seat control, and I'm calling control.enable, and again, not emitting the event. Okay, so this is one way that we're using, another way that we're using the observable and doing something with our form controls. Okay. Now, you may ask, why don't you use set value or patch value to set that the seat is occupied? Okay. So, first of all, like I said, I don't hold the data of whether the seat is occupied in the form control. Okay, I'm just using the disabled state. But if I would do it, okay, maybe you want to also have it in the seat control as the value. Can you do that? Can you say set value and then send, like I initialized the control, just initialize it with, or update it with an object that has the value and the disabled state? What do you think? Why not? Okay. That's right. We update only the specific form control only with the value also. Okay. So we need the control. We can have the control, but you can't do this with a set value. Okay. This is wrong. You can only pass the value and not anything about the state of the control. Okay. Now the same thing with patch value. Patch value and the set value are implemented exactly the same for a form control, but they have different implementation for form group and form array. That's why we have two different methods. But also in patch value, you can pass only the value and not the state. And what about maybe listening to value changes from within the form control, from within the seat? Okay. So when we create the seat control, we can also use the value changes event stream, subscribe to it, and react on the change of the value. So again, we need the value of whether the seat is occupied or not. Okay. And then we can say, okay, so disable me or enable me. So this is in the seat control itself. But like I said, I don't want to have this in the value. I want only one source of truth, one thing that tells me that this seat is occupied, and this will be the state of disabled or enabled. And this adds more logic to the seat control. Okay, now let's go on to validation. So you click and the seat is actually occupied. I mentioned another validation, a synchronous validation of whether you're selecting consequent seats in a row and not leaving gaps. I'm not showing how to implement that, but I just want you to know that you can actually have also validators on form groups and form arrays, not only on form controls. So you can implement the validators so that it will get the whole array and check it for gaps or check it for whatever you want. Okay? Another way to do this would be to actually implement a validator for the seat control, for one control, and when you get the control data, you also have a reference to its parent, and then you have actually the whole array. Okay? But I want to show you how to use the async validation, whether the seat is occupied or not. Okay? And we want not only to check it, we want to disable the control and unselect it. If the user has selected it, to unselect. And we want to also show an error message, okay, so that the user will know that they need to select another seat. Just one thing that's funny about forms, oh, no, never mind. You can't get an error message on the whole form or on the whole array. You get the error on wherever you put the validator on. So if I have somewhere an error, I can't check the whole form for it. I need to know where the error is. I need to check it on the array or the form control. Okay. So when you write a validator for the forms, a validator is just a function that gets the control and checks whether it's valid or not, and then returns null if it's valid, or an object of an error if it's not valid. Now, we have simple validators like required that you can just write the function and that's it. But we have factory functions for more elaborated, more complicated cases. For example, a minimum or maximum length or minimum or maximum value, where you actually have to set what is the value that is a minimum or maximum that you set there. Okay? So this is what I'm doing here. I have a factory function that takes, like I'm putting it on the seat control, this validator. So when I'm creating this validator, I'm sending the room ID and the row ID and seat ID, so that when I create this specific seat control, I pass it in the async validators. Okay? And what does it do? So first of all, very important, when this validator runs, we need to check whether this control is actually selected. Because if it's not selected, then we don't care about the validation. Okay? And we don't want to do too much work over there. Okay, so we will return null if it's not selected, so it's fine, it's not an error. If it is selected, then we're going to the database, to the server, and checking whether the seat is occupied, and we pass the room ID, row ID, and seat ID for that. And when we get back the result, we can pipe it to a map, and if we get the true, that it is occupied, then we send back an error object, and if not, then null. But this way, with the factory function, we actually create a new function for each seat control. And we have a lot of seat controls, and each one has its own function. So that's like it's a lot of memory in our browser that's taken, and we don't want to do that. So we can do this in another way. So instead of doing a factory function, we'll use one function, and we can get the data that we need about the room ID, row ID, and seat ID from other places. So remember that we hold these values in our in the value of the control, in the control. So I have control that value, that row ID and seat ID that I can use in this validator, okay, instead of passing it to a new function. And then what do I do with the room ID? So you see that I just magically put this room ID over there. Where does it come from? So I can actually save the room ID observable and use it here. So I use switch map because we have room ID here, and we're switching the map to get, well, yeah, we need to switch it to get the data from the server with this room ID. We need to get the event from the observable of the room ID that we had before. Okay. Okay. Then reacting to an error. Like I said, we don't have the errors on the form itself. So we need to know where the error came from. We can react on the array or on the seat control in our case. Okay? Only if we know exactly the location where we got the error, then we can use it in a global way. But otherwise, we need to do this from the control itself. And what do we need? What is the logic? The logic is to present the error message and also to disable the control. Okay? So these are different options, and I chose to do this in the seat form control. And I create a new subject, a new observable that I control, that I send the events for the errors. And this is a global thing. It sits somewhere in the service or wherever the whole form sits. Okay, and when we create the seat control, we also listen to its status changes observable and react on it. So we pipe it to map it to the errors. Okay, and we only want the distinct values, so we don't want to react on every time that we get the same change of status. Okay? So we subscribe here, and whenever we get this error, we emit the error in the selected seats error here. Okay? And this is the error that we will emit. And we also disable the control. But the thing is that when we disable the control, then it immediately emits again that the status has changed. And it validates again, and we get that it's valid now because it's disabled. And so we will only see this error message for maybe not even see it at all. And because it's already gone to true, from false to true. Okay, so what do? I want to control it by myself. Okay, so I only want the status where it's invalid. Okay, oops, I again want it distinctive, and I'm doing the same logic here, and I'm emitting only when it's invalid and only for 5,000 milliseconds. Okay, so I'm controlling for how much time we will see the error message. I'll quickly go over how we count the seats. This is the last thing that we're doing here. So again, I have a new subject that I'm creating. Actually, I'm using two subjects here. Okay, one for counting whenever the value changes of the control, again, it's implemented in the seat control. I'm listening to the values changes observable that comes from the form. Whenever it changes, I'm checking whether it was selected or not, and I'm passing 1 or -1 to the selected seats count. And then with another, with another observable that I created, that I'm actually piping to, I'm scanning, I'm accumulating the 1s and -1s, so I will get the number eventually. Okay? So this is how we get the number. But remember, when I have a seat that is selected, that is occupied, then I'm getting the data from the server, and some seats are occupied, and I'm not emitting an event for that. Because if I would emit an event, then it will emit the value changes event for seats that I don't care about. Okay? And it will act as if it was selected or not selected. So I don't want that. So that's why I wasn't emitting an event there. But I am emitting an event. Oh, here it is, when we disable the control, okay, or enable it. But I am emitting an event when it is disabled, when the async validator told us, okay, oops, this seat is actually occupied. So we disable the seat, so it's unselected. Okay, so just a few little notes to end with. Some things that aren't documented very well. So register on change. It's a callback for every value change that occurs only when you call set value, and not value change that the user has changed, not user input. And register on disabled change acts whenever there's an event of disabled or enabled, not when it actually changes. So if you have 10 times emitting that or disabling the same control 10 times, because you're calling this method 10 times even though it's already disabled, you will get 10 events here. So pay attention to that. And for summary, there are mainly 2 observables that we can use out of the box with the forms module in Angular. But there are other observables that you can actually use and do a lot of them in your forms. And with forms, I didn't show it here, with forms and with RxJS, it's actually very, very easy to test your forms, your controls, your services with fake async and set timeout and tick. So thank you very much. If you have questions, I'm here. You can come to me, or you can reach out to me in the email and Twitter. Thank you.